So I thought to give you a different angle on my office today so we're not always looking at the bookshelves. This is the wall next to the door, and look, I'm grown up and I put my posters in picture frames and like Velcro them to the wall. This is episode 2 of In the Spotlight. Episode 1 was done by Charlotte over at Ramblings of an Elfpire, and you should go check that out because it explains what this is. So go. I can wait for you. It's fine. I'll be right here when you get back. In the Spotlight is mostly Charlotte's brainchild, and she emailed me and said, hey, do you want to do this? And I said, yes, this will be fantastic. And it's different from Feature Shelf in that when I do a Feature Shelf, I am responding to a suggestion from the point of view of a teacher. I only talk about the story itself and not whether or not I liked it or whether or not I connected with it. And within the Spotlight, I get to respond, or I get to talk about books from the point of view of a reader and not a teacher, and I'm really excited about that. Now, what I love about working with someone else is that Charlotte and I have very different sensibilities when it comes to books on genres. We read very differently, so we both do a video on the same topic, and you're going to get different suggestions because, well, I mean, naturally you're going to get different suggestions because we're not going to repeat ourselves. But because we read very differently, I think it'll be incredibly interesting, and hopefully it will help, I don't know, at least me expand as a reader and get out of my little comfort zone. So romance is really not my genre, as evidenced by the fact that I'm doing a romance book gap challenge this year and trying to read a YA romance novel each month. And so far, so good, but I thought that instead of telling you about most of those that I've read this year, I will tell you about some that have really spoken to me as a reader. So Charlotte, I see your Lover's Dictionary by David Levithan, and I Raise You Every Day, also by David Levithan. And this was my birthday book last year. It was the book that I read and finished on my birthday before I went to work, and I thought it was fantastic. This main character, A, is non-gendered and essentially body hops. And then one day is in the body of this guy who has a girlfriend that A falls in love with, and then as A's body hopping through the rest of the story, it keeps trying to find a way to get back to this girl, and yeah. I will admit that I still have a lot of questions about some of the things in this novel, but I thought it was very well written and very well put together. So the little thing on the title or on the cover of the book says, every day a different body, every day a different life, every day in love with the same girl. The second one is the first novel that I've read by A.S. King, and I don't know why it took me so long to read something by A.S. King, because A.S. King is fantastic and is Ask the Passengers. I can't remember where I heard about this, but essentially Astrid has trust issues with people. She doesn't tell them things. She feels like her mother is pushy, and like she just can't talk to her parents. And even though her friends deal with some of the same issues that she doesn't feel like she can confide in them either. So she's in this relationship with this other girl from another school, and she won't tell anybody, and her friends keep, like, poking her for answers, and her girlfriend is like, okay, so when are we going to not be in the closet anymore? And the only people that she really feels like she can talk to are the people in the planes that fly over her house. She lays on the picnic table in the backyard and talks to the people in the plane. Now I absolutely must read more by A.S. King because, you know, my pocketbook can handle it. So I want to depart from YA for a second and talk about my favorite short story, or my favorite romance short story that's not romance in your traditional romance, but it is called A Painful Case, and it's from a collection of short stories called Dubliners. I should probably not put that in front of my face so there's not a shadow. Mr. Duffy, who is a rather stodgy kind of guy, has this clandestine relationship with a Mrs. Sinico until she does something that kind of puts him off. And then other things happen. There's a newspaper article called A Painful Case, which is where the title comes from. And I can't really talk more about it because it's not very long and I would totally give the plot away. But it's my favorite short story by James Joyce. It's not a love story so much as it about an intellectual relationship between two people and how one of those two people deal with other burgeoning feelings. The last book I'm going to recommend is one that I feel evangelical zeal for, and I've talked about a number of times since I read it back in January, and that is Codename Verity. Now, what you're saying to yourself right now is, wait a minute, I've read this, and it is not a romance, and I will argue that it depends on your perception. Those of us who have been in same-sex relationships are more likely to read this as there is a relationship between Verity and Maddie than those who have not. But it's a lovely, lovely story about how these two women came to work for the Air Force, and it's essentially Verity trying to prolong her life as she tells the story of her and Maddie. Actually, she mostly tells the story of Maddie, and then how Maddie journals what has happened and how she finds Verity toward the end, and it is sad. I was really upset at the end. But it's a fantastic and beautiful, beautiful story. And if you haven't read it, you absolutely should. You don't have to read it with my filter. But even if you don't read it as a romance, you should totally read this book. So those are my romance recommendations. They are, well, I think they're fantastic, but I suppose I wouldn't recommend them if I didn't think they were fantastic, right? So a couple of announcement things. We were already making some changes to how this is going to be put together. We're going to, each of us, Charlotte and I, will do 2 episodes in a row. She did the first one, I'm gonna do the second and third, so come back here next week for my recommendations on identity, books that I really love about identity. I'm really excited, I've already started my list. And if you've got recommendations for a theme that we should do, or a genre that we should do, or books that fit in the genre that we've done, leave them in the comments here, or Charlotte created a Goodreads group. So you can wander over there, put a link in the description. And I think that's it. You will see me next week. I will see you in the comments soon. Until then, I am the Supplier wishing you happy reading. Don't forget to be awesome.